New waterfront property to invest in on ocean fronts. Look at the maps, buy inland by the appropriate amount and wait a few years to sell. But do sell, as it will be underwater too later in most cases. New recipes for jellyfish. Global warming has very nicely enabled jellyfish to be a very successful species. It's taking over massive chunks of oceans, basically preventing most other forms of life from surviving. That's great news for people who like eating the stuff, those who want to learn how, and the people who figure out new recipes and names for waste species. New careers in wildlife preservation. As the majority of species cannot adapt as rapidly as the climate is changing, human intervention to preserve biodiversity will be required. Similar to the efforts to reintroduce whooping cranes, but much, much larger and more expensive, these efforts will require manually trapping and relocating species to new environments, as well as maintaining some species in arcs less than backspace greater than 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 zoos until they can be reintroduced into habitats. New work for wildlife biologists. Monsanto and agribusiness share boosts. The agriscience industry will be booming as they work to create strains that will work in new, more northerly soil conditions with weirder weather. Secondary spin-offs will include clearing of useless trees from potentially arable more northerly land, massive fertilization schemes and new supply chain links to accommodate the shift of agriculture northward. New life for terraforming wonks. Engineers with can-do attitudes interested in seeding the oceans with ferrous oxide, or seeding the atmosphere with insolation blockers, or geoscale carbon sequestration schemes will be in big demand on talk shows, panels and academics. In reality, no real money will be spent on these efforts, but they will be able to buy much better cars, and maybe even invest in the new waterfront properties. New mountaineering routes for people who hated ice climbing and cold. Enormous new swaths of peaks are being cleared of the annoying ice, snow and glaciers that made climbing them dangerous, slippery and very cold. Glacier tour guides can retool as mountaineers and set up a brand new set of ascents for a new class of peak tourists. New desert climates to study and play in. Much of the U.S. mid and southwest along with large portions of Australia and other continents will see droughts that cause massive desertification. Desert lovers and studiers will be fascinated as places that once supported significant ecosystems wither and die, turning into arid expanses where tiny amounts of biomass cling desperately to life in niches. Expect more quad and dirt bike sales as these areas lose the pesky underbrush that made freewheeling difficult, and sand dunes take over greater and greater areas. New snakehead growth areas. People smuggling of climate refugees will be a tremendous opportunity for increased revenue. From the completely illegal boat people set adrift on leaky fishing boats, to the upscale lawyers who finagle loopholes to get the rich into safer countries, an enormous migration of people will be occurring. Many of these people will be highly educated, deeply talented and very desperate, exactly the types of people that modern economies will want to attract to increase their human capital. Expect countries to be vying for the best of the most desperate. Cartographers are going to have a great century or two. Every shoreline in the world will have to be redrawn, over and over again. Entire archipelagos will disappear. Map makers are going to be having a field day, living high on the jellyfish. New wine regions to open up. Traditional vineyards around the world will dissolve and disappear, or have to turn to hardier and less appealing grapes resulting in poorer wines. But that just means that places that were once inhospitable to the fruit of the vine are now growth areas. Watch as enterprising vino entrepreneurs stake out Alaskan and Yakutsk claims, and as gold medals start migrating further from the equator with the temperate zones. Great new sources of pre-bleached coral knickknacks. Let's face it, coral makes for beautiful tourist tchotchkes, but when it's alive it's got all of those annoying coral builders and has to be cleaned extensively before it's fit for selling at cruise ship ports. Now most of the reefs will be pre-bleached, so all locals will have to do is dive down and break off chunks. Much more efficient, and safer too, as the lack of fish on the reefs means no ocean predators either. Adaptation to global warming is producing a host of great new opportunities. Get in at the ground floor, but check the ocean rising projections to make sure that your ground floor won't be underwater before you make your nut.